Hello everybody, welcome to Woodworking Wisdom. Today we are making a little project like a kind of mechanical automata, I think they're called. So it's going to be 3 little chicks in a nest going up and down and a mother bird coming in to feed the chicks. So we're going to try and make it nice and simple. We're going to use a bunch of dowels. We've got some wood pre-cut. We just need to cut a few shapes, drill a few holes, and we're going to create this shaft that goes right through the middle of the project with little cams on it, and that's what's going to send everything up and down. But you'll see what I mean as we go along. So let's go to the bench and start marking up and cutting our piece of wood. So we need to make a frame, and I've got this piece of timber here. This is 12mm thick, 90mm wide, and we want lengths of 200s. Okay. Of course this is going to change depending on your project, but for this one we're going to have it 200mm long. So we've just marked off 2 little bits there, and then just going to pop a line across with a square, and then we can cut them on the bandsaw. We're going to want a couple of other little squares out of this end, but let's cut this one first, and then we can come back and cut those last 2 bits. Okay, so over to the bandsaw. We're going to use the fence to keep everything nice and square. So just locking the fence off at our 200mm line. So I've got my goggles on. We're going to pop the extractor on. So that's going to be our top and bottom. We just need some sides now, and I'm going to make them at 80mm. Again, it's going to depend on what kind of project you're doing. So again, just resetting the fence. I can lock that one off here. And then we can remove our bits from the back of the table. Those are my 280s, and that one's very close, so I'm going to put that, leave that on the table. So these bits here are going to form a really simple frame for all our mechanical bits to kind of fix to. We need to drill some holes, and at this stage it's worth looking at what sort of size dowels that you've got. We're going to use this one, I think, is a 4mm. So we need to cut just over 4mm holes in this for our dowel to move up and down in. We can't use a 4mm drill bit because then these are going to get stuck in there. So we're going to go for a 4.5. That's going to allow these dowels to go up and down once we've got the rest of the mechanism together. We will need to do 1, 2, 3 holes for our little chicks, and then 1 hole for the mother bird. Going to find centre line on here. So it's 90mm wide, so we're going at 45. We're going to do another 45 a bit further down the project, and then we're just going to draw a line to give us our middle or centre line. So we need to drill some holes along this centre line. We also need to drill some holes on our end bits, so we need to find centre on those. So we're going to go from corner to corner on both of these. Just getting ready for our drilling. So we've revealed centre, kind of X marks the spot on these, that's where we're going to drill those ones. And then it depends on your spacing where you drill these. Like I say, we're going to have 3 little chicks here that are coming up out of a nest, and then a kind of mother bird that's going to be sat on the edge of the nest. So I need to just work out the spacings between each of those components. So I'm kind of imagining the components that we're going to stick to this, and we're going to have a nest shape here which all our 3 little chicks are going to sit in, And then, like I say, a little mother-bird that's going to be going up and down here. So I'm going to come in 40 mil from the edge here. So it's sitting on 200, we said it's 200 long. So we're going to do a dot at 160. Then we're going to have a 30 mil spacing between each of our chicks. So it's going to be one at 130 and one at 100. And then we want our mother chick, that's going to be a bit further spaced away. So let's give that another 45 mil from there. So looking down from the top of the rule here, we've got one at 55 mil, one at 100 mil, one at 130 and one at 160. And that's our drilling spots. So just going to mark those off a bit more clearly. And then that one's ready for drilling. Remember, we're using a 4 mil dowel. So we're going to cut a hole in that 4.5 mil, which is going to allow that to freely move up and down through our piece of timber. So we're on our benchtop pillar drill here. Really nice little thing, and I've also got myself a set of these fish drill bits, and these go up in 0.5 mil increments, so really useful for this where we're using different sized dowel bits. So we've got our 4.5, remember our dowel was 4 mil. And these are lip and spur type drill bits, so they're really easy to kind of centralize. You can use that little spur to find exactly where we're drilling, and I've also set the depth of the drill so that when we're drilling we're just going to cut ever so slightly into our little backing board there. Okay, this is going to help reduce the breakout as the drill bit goes through the bottom. And also by setting that, we know we're going to go right the way through without leaving a little bit at the bottom. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 holes to drill. Let's just go through that, and of course wearing our goggles. So we've drilled our holes, and really important to remember that that is for the 4 mil dowel, that it's not too sloppy, that we've just got a little bit of movement in there, but it is free to move up and down through that hole. With this one, we're going to use a slightly bigger dowel. That's going to hold the main shaft that sits right the way through the project, and that's a 6 mil dowel, that one. So we want our 6.5 drill bit. So remove that 4.5. And we want the 6.5. So we may need to reset the depth on the drill. So I'm just going to drop the table a little bit. We can bring the drill right down to its full travel, and we can see that it's going to go into the board there, but not hit the table, the cast iron table underneath. So that's great there. We can lock the table back off. Get rid of any debris there. And again, we're just going to drill holes on center. Good. And drilling these on the pillar drill as well, it's going to keep everything nice and kind of at 90 degrees. So this hole is going to be at 90 degrees to this face. So there's no kind of wandering, and that's going to allow our dowel to sit nice and straight through the project. So we've drilled our holes. I'm just going to roughly put this together so we get an idea of where we're going with this. So these are our ends with our hole drilled through. Remember, we've got a 6 mil dowel as our main kind of shaft. So that's going to run through there. And then we've got the top, which is going to just sit above that. And as we turn this is our kind of main shaft going right the way through. We're going to attach some little cams in underneath these holes. And when we rotate this, it's going to push those cams up and down, and then in turn push the little dowels, which we're going to have just peeking out the top here. So for the time being, just making sure that everything fits, that everything's going to kind of work with each other, and that we've drilled the right size holes. But that looks good. Okay, so we've just checked that everything goes together. We just want to lose these pencil marks. So a nice rough abrasive, I've got an 80 grit on there. We can just sand this off. Cool, so we're all back nice and clean pieces. And now when we glue this together, we don't have to worry about getting back in with abrasives and things like that. So we're going to use a 5-minute epoxy. This is the Zap Gap. And we want equal parts of each of this. And again, I'll try to do just a little bit more than what you're going to need, rather than having to mix up 2 batches. Obviously we don't want to do too much and waste it. So a little splodge of each, equal amount, and then we need to give that a really good mix. You could use any sorts of joinery techniques if you wanted. You could dovetail the ends, you could down glue, pocket hole, any which way you want to join them. I'm just really, this isn't going to take much strain or stress, so I'm just putting a little bead of this very strong glue along each end, just using my little mixing stick to kind of put some glue on. And we don't want to put too much that we've got loads of squeeze out when we come to putting the top on. But we do want enough on there so it's got a good grip of it. So just spread that around a little bit. Perhaps a little bit more down this end. And then we've got our 2 ends. Just going to pop that on there. Kind of roughly line it up. You have got a little bit of open time with this glue, but not too much, because we want to be getting back on with this as soon as we've cut our other components. They do a 30-minute version as well if you're not in such a rush. But this one's really good if you wanted to kind of crack on with your projects. You've got that 5-minute set time. So I'm just going to plonk that on there for now. We can line it up. Get everything lined up. Again, we can always come back to the belt sander and take off any edges, or a little block plane, something like that, if it's not perfect. But we'll get it as good as we can and just save any of those little jobs a bit later on. So we've just turned this through 90 degrees so that it's lying down. And we're going to clamp the top face and the bottom face and just try and keep this nice and lined up. Sometimes when you put the pressure on with the clamp, it can slip a little bit with the glue. So just watch out for that and make any adjustments you need to. Good, that's pretty solid. I'd say give that a few minutes to dry, and we've got some other jobs to be getting on with whilst that's drying. So like I say, we're going to have a little nest design. So we need to do draw out a little nest, 3 little chicks, and then also the kind of mother bird that's coming in, or father. I think they both feed the chicks. So we are going to just kind of freehand sketch them out. You could use designs, you can find lots of designs, and I've kind of gone for a cartoony look to my little chicks, because I didn't realise how funny looking little chicks are when they're first born, and they look quite scary coming up with their open mouths. So we're going for something a little bit more kind of cartoon themed. So it's not to scare any little kids. So we've got a bird that we're going to do, the kind of parent bird, if you will, and I'm just using one that I've done before as a little reference, just off camera there. And this needs to be slightly weighted. So it's going to have a big tail coming out one side, because we want this bird to kind of dip in and then use its own weight to kind of dip back again. It should make sense once we get the mechanism together. But I guess what I'm saying is we want a big tail on this bird for now. So we're going to do a little bird shape, almost like a bee. The tail's going to come out the back there. And just some kind of like feather design. Again, you can make this any shape you want. We want a little eye on this, and then we're going to have a beak coming out. I'm going to cut a little smile on it so it looks happy and friendly. And then also we want a wiggly worm, or whatever it is that you want your bird to be holding or feeding their chicks. I'm going with a worm because it's quite visual, that you can see it's a wiggly worm. So that's our kind of parent bird. And again, I might just bring this bottom bit out a little bit, thinking forward that we're going to need our dowel that kind of pushes on here, and we need a pivot point a bit later as well. So we're going to push here, it will pivot there, and that's going to get the bird to be kind of dipping in or offering up that little worm to the babies. The babies need to be facing this way. So again, we're just going to do almost a kind of a thumb shape, if you will. Remember, we're making this cartoony. And then a little open beak on the top, waiting for its food. So we want 3 like that. Do them different sizes if you want. Remember, we've got our spacing to consider, so we've done 30mm between our birds, so we don't want to make them over 30mm or they're going to foul on one another. So a really simple little chick. So we've got our 3 chicks, and we've got our parent bird, and we need to do a nest. And the nest we want almost to come up, so it almost covers the bird, so they kind of peep out. So we can kind of give ourselves a rough line of the kind of edge of the nest, almost to the top of these birds. So we've got a line here, and then we're going with a kind of a canoe shape. We want to suggest that this is going round and round the back here. So it looks a bit like a canoe or a kind of a Viking ship shape. So we can just lightly pencil that on. considering the width there, might just go a bit further that way, so we've got more of the nest. And then we're going to curl up these ends and then really kind of roughly draw this canoe shape. And we're going to do a few little cutouts into that to make it look like it's made of twigs, or I'm going to put some kind of rough shapes of some twigs. And again, you can print this off and copy it down. You don't have to draw it out freehand. And then just a couple of little bits what we can pierce through, and then you can see a little bit of the mechanism underneath as well. I think that always looks cool. We're not trying to hide the fact that it's got a mechanism in underneath. We want to kind of show that off. So just trying to make some little cutout shapes into that to make it look a little bit more nesty. And I think always a good idea to put like a leaf or something. So let's do a little stick out here. We're getting close to our little birdies, but we've got space just to put a little leaf in there, and maybe another little leaf shape in behind it. Again, that's just going to help suggest that it's made of twigs or leaves or whatever it is. So now we've got some shapes we can cut out on the scroll saw. So I think let's head over to the scroll saw. We'll cut these out. We'll use a drill bit to cut the holes. Like I say, this is quite cartoony. We're not going for that kind of realism. So yeah, we're going to do some little drill holes for the eyes, and just basically cut these shapes out on the scroll saw. So I fitted the scroll saw with a spiral blade just to cut this worm shape really. It's quite wiggly, it's got lots of changes in direction. It's just going to make it a lot easier using that, that spiral blade. It's also going to give a slightly different texture to the rest of the bird, so I have lots of little lines scored down it. So I'm just going to cut in towards that little worm. And of course with a spiral blade you can cut in any direction. So you can see it's going to be really good for that kind of wiggly shape. You don't have to rotate the workpiece at all. We can just use sideways pressure. And I'm going to take it up to the beak, but not cut into it. And then we're going to backtrack using the teeth on this side, on the waist side, to kind of scoot back up that line. And then coming around the top, trying to keep it all nice and rounded. This looks like quite a big worm, so I'm going back and just trimming some off, make it nice and delicate. So again, taking it down to the beak, then I'm going to back off a little bit and I'm going to cut around, not actually on that shape. We'll come back with a different blade to cut that bit. Again, approaching that worm nice and slowly. When you put any pressure on this blade, any direction, it flexes a little bit. And then when you stop the project, it rights itself. So it usually overcuts a tiny bit if you don't slow down right at the end of your cut and allow for that to kind of overshoot. But you can get some really delicate shapes with these spiral blades. that's where I want to be with my blade. Backtracking, being careful not to cut anymore, and always follow the side which the waste is on. Good. And now it's just a quick swap of the blade from the spiral to the straight. And this is our modified geometry number 5. So I'm just checking which way the teeth run. This one does have a few upwards facing teeth. It's going in the bottom clamp. Oh, I haven't quite got it down far enough. Quite a difficult thing to see, these blades, they're quite thin. But let's just get that seated at the back of that clamp. We can bring the top one down, ping it into place. We're going to need a little bit more there, top clamp, and then we're pretty much back to tension. So we've got our number 5 modified geometry blade. I'm just popping my spiral blade out the way there, and we can just cut this shape now, just being extra careful when we approach that, that little worm, that we don't chop it off. So you can come in any way you like. I think I'm going to come in along this bottom shape. So my whole down clamp's just in the way slightly. So just undo that one, lift it up a touch, make sure the project can swing right the way around, and then away we go. I've got a couple of lines here where I do on the pencil line. I want this outside line where I just tweak the shape. And then we're going to cut up to our little worm. Again, nice and slow on that approach. You don't want to overshoot it. There's not much material there. I'm going to stop the saw and maybe just remove that piece of wood so it's not creating a lever effect on there. Going to trim into that beak now. Good. Going to lose that a little bit. And because it's kind of a cartoony style, I'm going to cut a nice big smile on this bird. Be nice and friendly. Lovely. So, back to cutting the rest of the shape. I'm going to take these lines of the feather right the way down into the piece of timber. take that waste bit away. So it's sliding back down the table towards me, and then we can pick up I think I'm going to cut across the top here. Oops. Again, nice and gentle on that approach. And so we just remove that little bird. And hopefully you can see how fine that little worm is. And it's got clutched in its mouth. A couple of little bits to take out on the back of the tail feathers here. So let's just do that while we're on the saw. Good, and then there's just a little bit here. Good. Now a couple of drill holes, one to create the pivot point where this bird is going to kind of dip in, and then a drill hole for the eye as well. Onto the chicks. So remember we drew out our little chicks along the bottom here. We don't really need to measure it out. I can see kind of roughly where centre is going to be. We could put a little pencil mark where the centre of our bird's going to be. And then we want to drill in the centre of the board some little holes. And it's worth doing this before cutting them out on the scroll saw. They're quite little things to manipulate when we got them on the scroll saw. So if we can use the dowel to push up into the hole, it gives us something a little bit extra to hold on to. So I'm going to make 4 little drill holes. We need our 4mm drill bit to match our 4mm dowel. I think we could just drill these by hand. Quick little job. But again, if you're going for super accuracy, do them in the pillar drill. So increasing the speed on the drill driver. And we're just going down a little bit. That's probably about 10mm deep or a centimetre deep. Same on that one. Just going to test fit that with a bit of our 4mm dowel. Good. It's a good little fit. Okay, so we can start to cut this out on the scroll saw now. So I think first cut I'm going to do, I'm just going to separate these 3 little birdies off from the nest. We can put that to one side and then we're not wrestling with this longer piece of timber. And I'll pick up on the back line of the bird there. And then we're just going to go around these shapes. I'm going to keep a bit of the 4mm dowel nice and close. I'll pop that in my pocket in case we need it. I want to keep that bit nice and sharp, so I'm just going to overshoot and cut that shape out. Now this is where the dowel comes in handy. You can put it in there and it gives you a little bit of extra something to hold on to should you need it. My blower's just getting away, so I'm just going to angle that a little. Being really careful and slow on that last little bit. Good, so that's our first little chick. And we've gone with this kind of trumpet, like kind of splayed open mouth. Next chick. This is the bigger one of the three. Another little way to keep that corner sharp is we could do a loop-the-loop. So we could overshoot like that, bring the whole project around, cut a little loop, and now we're coming back in on that angle. Keep everything nice and sharp on that beak. Another little trick we could do is to reverse back out into that hole. We can do a let's just get that little plug out. So we were reversing back out that way. We can use that bit of waste to turn the project around. And then we can back up into there and take our cut from there. Again, that gives you a really nice definition in that part. We'll do our loop-the-loop again. There's chick number 2. Might find it easier just to cut around this for now. We've got the waste to be able to do that. Just a bit quicker. But we've shown you a couple of techniques there you could use. On my bit of dowel. Good. And that's our last little chick. We've got our nest shape on here now. I've just drilled a couple of little holes. We want a couple of little voids or apertures going straight through the nest to give it that kind of twig or woven look. So I'm going to cut this piece off here, and then we've just got that bit to contend with. Again, I like to just drop in on the body of whatever it is that you're cutting, and then you've got a bit of it done already, and then you save a little bit of timber this side. So let's cut this shape. Let's start up on this corner. Again, this pencil line is really just a rough mark, a rough kind of shape. We don't need to stick to it. I'm trying to make mine a little bit more organic looking, so changing the direction quite often. I'm going to back up through. We can snap that bit off because that's just the waste. And then I can make another little cut in here. Just to widen that. So just coming up against some debris in the extraction plate there. So just doing a few little random cuts in to suggest that this isn't just one flat piece. Constantly just jiggling it a little bit, making that random or more organic kind of feel. We don't want it to be straight and square and things. We've got a couple of little leaves here sticking out. Come out that cut. So it's also a really nice safe saw to use. You see me getting little bits out the back there. Obviously I would only do that on this type of saw. You don't want to be fishing things out of the back of the bandsaw or anything like that. This is a really safe machine to use. And with lots of practice you can have the confidence to remove any little bits of debris. You know, it's very unlikely to cut yourself on the back of the blade. So I've got a little bit to cut in there. In fact, I'm going to leave that bit. We've got our bird that's going to sit up on that corner and we need to drill a hole in it. So we don't want to leave it too short grain through here, so I'm going to leave that bit. We can cut out these little inserts, all those little holes in the nest. Oops, scared myself then. It's just jumping on the table. Sometimes the blade will just lift those and ping them out. Sometimes you just have to retrieve them by getting them out the back of the project there. But that's our little nest shape. Again, you could make that a bit more decorative if you like. I'm going to keep it quite plain so that the star of the show is actually the kind of the movement of the piece. Okay, so now we've got pretty much most of our components together. We can start assembling, get the cams on the shaft and start putting things together and offering them up and getting the spacings right and all that sort of stuff. So we'll be back to the bench and just seeing how this is going to fit together. Okay, so let's have a little recap of what we've done. Our little frame for our mechanism is all dry now, and I've just done a little bit of rough sanding. We can always tidy that up if you've got any overspill of glue and things. But we just want to kind of see how the thing's going to go together. We've got our little chicks here, which are going to sit on top of these holes, so we know we've got the spacing right, that they're not going to kind of foul into one another when they're moving up and down. We've got our nest, which we want to sit just in front of the chicks, and then they'll be partly obscured by that nest. And then we've got the mother bird or the parent bird, which is going to sit on a little hinge up here. So really what we're just doing is just making sure that things are in the right place, that we're not going to have any surprises when we actually start gluing things or doweling things on. Okay, and I think that's all going to work. We're going to have that one dipping down and these ones coming up and down. So we've got a few holes to drill. I'm going to just quickly drill the holes for the eyes on each of these birds, and we've got a little hole just to drop on the parent bird there. So we're going with our 4mm drill bit, and I'm just going to drill these by hand. I think probably safest in the edge of the vise there, so we're not holding a small component like that and drilling. Again, just going to use that little the little sharp point on the end of that lip and spur drill bit, the spur, just to centralise on our pencil mark, and then we don't have to go far with that one. We're literally just drilling that eye shape. One more of those to do. Again, line up that spur. Any little bits of breakout we can just drill, we can sand off in a bit. So now we've got our 3 little chicks, and the parent one I can hold. We've got a bit more to hold on to here. That's the eye for that one. And this drill hole that we're going to use for the pivot needs to be just a slightly bigger drill bit. We are going to use the 4mm dowel to create that little pivot point between these two. But the bird needs to have a slightly bigger hole because we want to feed the dowel right the way through this one and it be able to pivot on that point. So we're going to use a slightly bigger drill bit for that. We do want to drill the back of the nest where it's going to pivot. So we're going to pop it in on this area here. So just a little hole here somewhere. And then our 4mm dowel will go into that. And then when we drill through that one, we can slide that along there, and that creates the pivot point. Next job, we need to start thinking about our shaft that runs right the way through here, and the cams that we're going to create on it. So we're going back to our 6mm dowel. We're going to push that through, just line that up the hole, and we need to just leave enough of length that we can create a little crank here. So just roughly, I'm going to mark that off. So we've got our length, but we don't have to mess around with this whole long dowel. Japanese pull saw, you don't really want to cut these rounds on the bandsaw, as they rotate as you feed it onto the blade. So just nice and gentle with a pull saw, and then we've got our length. Okay, so just going to pop these bits to the side. We want to create just a little cap that's going to sit on there, and it's going to hold that in place. So that's our next job. Let's do that. We're going to take a bigger piece of dowel. I think this one, let's have a little look with the calipers. So that's a 9mm piece of dowel, and we're going to drill a 6mm hole in that so that we can create a little cap that sits on the end of here. Again, we want to cut that in the pull saw, with the pull saw. Let's get a nice square. We've got a bit of muck on that end, so I might do a couple of cuts on this one. And we just want enough for a little cap. Now we're going to hold that in a little vise. And on the vise here you can see these little V shapes. We want to get our round in that V and just hold on to it there. That means it's nice and straight in relation to the vise. We can drill this on the pillar drill now and get a nice accurate hole in the middle for our 6mm dowel to go into. So like I say, we've got a very small section here held in the vise. We definitely don't want to be holding this by hand. Really small component. Get hold of it in the vise, and again use the V in the jaw to keep that nice and upright. We're trying to get this nice and central. And again, we're not going all the way through, just down enough so that that dowel can sit in there. And that's what we've ended up with, a little kind of cuff or a cap. We're back at the pillar drill. I just need to set the depth for this one, so I'm going to loosen off the table. Bring that table up. So while we're at the pillar drill, we've got another hole to drill through here. This one's going right the way through, and remember this is going to be our pivot point for our parent bird, and we want a 4mm dowel to run through this, but not too tight. So we're going to go 4.5 on our drill bit. Again, we set the height so we can drill right the way through and just into our little backing board. So 4.5, and that's going to allow that bird to pivot. And you can see the weight of the tail is what's bringing the bird back. And that's the kind of motion that we're going to try and achieve when we put it in the mechanism. So we've got our main shaft that runs through this whole mechanism, and we want to put some little cams on that. So this is just a bit of a broom handle, and I've just cut those off again with the pull saw. We don't really want to be using these on the bandsaw because it has the potential to roll. So cut 4 little cams, and like I say, just a bit of a broomstick. Okay, they're about 1 inch in diameter, but nice and round. Now, if we drill those off center and pass one of these sticks through it, as it rotates, it's going to go up and down. So it's, you know, it's rotating off center, creating that that movement. So we've got our 6mm shaft, so we need to drill some 6mm holes. We've got 1 for each of the birds, and then 1 for the kind of parent bird, we're calling it today. So let's drill some holes on the pillar drill again. 6mm this time. So we fit our 6mm drill bit. Again, we're holding these little rounds in a vise. Really important when we've got a small component like this that we're not drilling into it, it potentially picking up and then trying to grab onto it. Really dangerous on the pillar drill. So we are holding it in a vise, and again we've got that little V up in this jaw that's going to hold the round, give it a bit more surface area. We're drilling these off center so that when it turns we've got that undulation, the high point is changing as it turns. So we're drilling off center. And this is pine. This is just an end grain of pine, so it's going to be really easy to drill and hardly any breakout on the back. Good. Doing it in the vise with a pillar drill like this as well is going to keep that nice and straight, so that there's no wobble on these cams. There we go, that's all our holes drilled, and we've got that off-center hole. Yeah, we'll see how that works in the main mechanism now. So we're going to do a rough assembly now. We're just going to see how things go together. Now, because we've glued this together as a frame, we need to just put this main shaft running through, and we need to put these cams on as we go. So I'm just going to roughly slide them on for now, and we can work out the spacings in a moment. But they're kind of gripping onto that, which is really good. That's what we want. So we can put our shaft through. Let's pop that little cap end on. That may just help things from stop moving around as we kind of align these cams to these holes on the top. And I'm just going to do that by eye for now. We can always tweak it again in a bit. Let's pop that back on. I just push the whole thing that way, and then we need to just align each of these cams with the hole above it.
getting each one underneath its drill hole, and we can always use a bit of dowel just to test where it's going to sit, and we want them quite central in that wheel. That looks good, and if we were to turn that, it's going to bring that up and down. That's good there. This one needs to come slightly to my left. And again, that one just slightly to the left. And we can rotate these in a moment to get that up and down action going. So we've roughly got our cams in place. They're sitting just below those drill holes. We need to tweak these so that they alternate. So I'm just twisting them round on this kind of main shaft here, so that one's up here, and then we've got a down, so that just needs to rotate a bit towards me, and then that one is going to be the up. So we need to rotate it on the shaft so that it's sitting high. So we've got an up, down, okay? And as we rotate that, you can see them physically getting higher and lower. So now we need to pop our dowels in. Our dowels that are going to come from the bottom of the birds, and they're going to rest on these little wheels or cams underneath them. Again, we're going with that 4mm dowel. Remember, we drilled a 4.5 drill hole, so that these dowels are going to move nice and smoothly in those holes. But we need to work out the length that we need for these to pop up. Remember, we've got our nest, which is going to sit in front of them like that, and they need to be able to come up to a point where they're just peeping out of the nest. So let's get some little bits of dowel. So we've got our dowel, our 4mm dowel, and let's cut that. Just a kind of educated guess of a length. We can always trim a bit more off. That's going in our 4mm hole we drilled in the bottom of the bird. So that's just going to stick in there. We could glue that if we want. It's actually a pretty decent hold just through friction. But let's drop that one in on top of that cam, and at its low point the bird wants to be just almost sat on our on the kind of flat here. So just testing that. That looks to be about right. I think we got it right on that first cut. And you can just see that little birdie peeping out of the nest there. So it's doing what we wanted it to do. But let's get the others done. So use that one as a bit of a guide. I think maybe the next one will cut just ever so slightly longer. Oops. Just a few swipes with the saw. Any little broken bits we can just sand off in a moment, and let's do the other one while we're here as well. Good. Little piece of abrasive just to knock off any little burrs or anything like that. And also to knock off the hard edge. Sometimes they catch on the cams, so we're just going to roll that around. Oops. Remove that hard edge and any little kind of splinters from or break out from the sawing process. Good. So let's try our little birds now. We're going to pop those dowels into the bottoms of the holes that we drilled. And just a quick little test run. So there's a little bit of friction that's holding these back. I think we need to just pop on a little bit of some sort of lubricant, and in this case we're going to use some wax. So we're going to use the wax as a lubricant. We're going to just wax these little dowels, and on the ends too. I'll just quickly whiz those. Okay, so we've got our basic movement now. We've got these two side ones coming up and dropping back down, alternating with the middle one. That's the kind of movement we want. It was getting a little bit stuck, so we've used a bit of wax to lubricate all those bits where they are touching to reduce the friction. And now we've got a bit of movement. So that's a relief. We've got our little chicks working. Let's go back to our nest. So we've got our nest here. Remember, on the back of that we have our pivot point for the parent bird to sit on there, and we're going to have the dowel on the last cam just lifting this bird by the tail, so it looks like it's kind of offering that worm to its babies. I think first we need to just fix this nest down so that this becomes a solid pivot point, and then we can pop our last dowel in here, and let's just give it a little test run, make sure we're happy with how it works. So popping the dowel in there, going to bring the nest this way and just give it a little test ride. This is the kind of point that you want to make sure that everything's working, and if things are catching, you need to make any tweaks, now's the time to do it before we start gluing things and fixing things together. But happy with that. We've got a bit of movement on the parent bird and those alternating little chicks. So let's glue this nest to the frame of this. Again, we'll use that same glue, the 5-minute epoxy, so that we don't have to wait around too long. So going to mix some glue and stick our nest on. So not so much glue this time. Equal parts of each with this epoxy, 5-minute resin, and just using an old scrap of wood to mix that up. You could use a PVA glue, but we're a little bit pushed for time, so we're going with a 5-minute epoxy just to give us a good bond, and we can carry on working. So all along that bottom edge, and again, we don't want too much kind of squeeze out, so I'm just going to take off any excess where I feel it might kind of squeeze out the bottom and make a bit of a mess. That's plenty to hold the bit down. And really important that we've got this piece of dowel facing this way. And I'm going to put it up against those little birds, just loosely, not touching on, but nice and close, so that they don't rotate. So they're working up and down on this this nest, and almost using that as a kind of a point so it can't twist. So that just needs a 5-minute drying time, and then we can start to include our other little bits. We need to make a little crank on this side to turn the whole the main shaft there, so we're going to make a little handle next while that's just drying. Using a bit of the offcut, this, as you can see, the shapes of the birds in here, we don't need to make it from anything special, but I'm just going to run my finger along the side of that board there. Doesn't need to be that long either. We can go probably about 30 mil. That's about 30 mil. Good. And we can just bring these edges in. So we're creating almost like a little pill shape or a lozenge shape. Like so. And we're going to cut 2 6mm holes. Better just double check that that's over 6mm. We've got 10mm there, so we're good. We'll cut this on the scroll saw and then just drill that. So, going to cut this little shape, resting on the side of the blade before just rotating it. We're keeping it long grain, so the grain is running up through the this part we're going to call the crank. And then swing in. So we've got that nice rounded edge. And that last corner we can just sand. So we've got rounded here, round there. And then we can just sand that last bit in with a bit of abrasive. Spend a bit more time on getting the shape right. But that's ready for drilling. That's going to be part of our crank over on this side. So again, we're using our little vise. We've not got a round on this. It's got rounded ends, but it's not an actual round. So this time we want to grip on those 2 flat faces, and what I'm doing is just leveling it off with the jaws so that we get a nice straight hole down through. Take your time to get this bit right, because if they're off at an angle, when you're cranking it, it kind of goes in an ellipse rather than just turning in a circle. So checking it's flush with the jaws, grip that down. We've got our 6mm drill bit, and we need to just drill right the way through this, a couple of holes. You can feel the resistance change as you come through the bottom. Nice and slow with that drill bit. Again, we want it to cut its way out rather than punch out. And there we've got our little crank. So we've got our crank here. This is basically just that rounded bit of wood with a couple of holes drilled in it. We're going to slide that over that 6mm dowel, 6mm hole, so we know that it's going to fit through. We can now trim this, and the crank and that little cap that we've put on is going to stop this going side to side. Okay, we can cut this one off now, nice and flush. Let's grab the pull saw. Good. Now that part there becomes the handle, so that can just slide in there. And then as we rotate this, you can see it's sending those little chicks up and down, ready to eat their worm. So remember our bird from before? That can now slide over the back of that dowel on the nest, and then hopefully as we crank this one, you can see the bird going in to feed the little chicks, and those chicks going up and down. You could decorate this however you like. Maybe you're into pyrography and you would like to put a bit more detail on there. It would make it a bit more realistic, or a different scene. Really the important bit is where those cams sit on this main shaft. And there's lots of other ways that you can make these rotate by putting another disc on the horizontal, and as you crank this, that cam will be driving another one, which will make things go round in circles. But there's lots of little different types of mechanisms, so worth having a look at a few, see if you can kind of work them into your project. This was a really simple one. We kept it simple with just 4 cams on it. 2 slightly different movements, because we've got an up and down movement with the chicks, and we've also got this kind of dipping in movement by having a little pivot point on the top of that bird. But that's about it, really. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more content like this, please check out our channel. There's lots of different videos on there, from wood turning to hand tools. Lots of free content, loads of project ideas. So hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon for more woodworking wisdom.